I'll be speaking with Malachy Kilbride, a longtime peace and social justice activist. He was arrested a few days ago in D.C., along with others of the National Campaign for Nonviolent Resistance. He's also director of the National Campaign for a Peace Tax Fund, which I hope to talk about too. He's presently in Camp Spring, Maryland. Good afternoon.
Hi, how are you doing?
All right. So tell us about this action in Washington a few days ago.
Well, as you said, I am a participant with the National Campaign for Nonviolent Resistance, and we do several actions a year, speaking truth to power to our elected and appointed officials. The continuing war the U.S. is funding and supporting with the Saudis against the people of Yemen has been weighing on us for some time, so we decided to organize a visit to Representative Hoyer's office. Hoyer is a representative from the state of Maryland, and he's also the minority whip, so he does have power within his party and on Capitol Hill. Mm-hmm. There's a House Continuing Resolution, House Continuing Resolution 81, which is directing the president to pursue the War Powers Resolution to remove the United States Armed Forces from Yemen and continuing support to the Saudis with their proxy war. And Hoyer, in his capacity as minority whip, has been trying to stop this continuing resolution from going to the House floor for a full House vote. Unlike other pieces of legislation which start out in a committee and then are voted on in the committee and then go to the House floor for a vote, this continuing resolution can go to the House floor directly because it pertains to the war powers in the Constitution. So it's a special kind of piece of legislation. And so Hoyer has been behind the scenes trying to get especially Democrats to not support this piece of legislation for a vote. And but it's still moving forward. I think you looked it up when we were chatting before, that there's around 50 co-sponsors of the bill. So that's pretty good.
Now, back last fall, there was kind of great hopes about this. I think it was called the Ghana resolution at that time, after one of the prime sponsors, and there was hopes that it could actually do something rather than, other pieces of legislation that had been tried that would have cut off some arms. But this was much more far-reaching, and then the whole thing got put on a back burner. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Correct. So Representative Kahana of California on the House Foreign Affairs Committee introduced this bill at the end of September. And it really is a significant piece of legislation in what it could do. And so, pieces of legislation like this, don't really get a lot of co-sponsors in just the short amount of time that has been introduced. So there is interest in stopping the funding for this proxy war. It's clear to anyone who is paying attention to the news that what is happening is we have diseases and famine developing in Yemen, and especially the youngest and most vulnerable people in Yemen, the children, are affected by this war. And I think people are starting to, people in Congress anyway, are starting to realize that we're on the wrong side here. We're doing something really bad.
So let's describe what actually happened. So this was the 11th?
Yes, it was the same day in which many people were marking the 16th year, going into the 17th year of the prison camp in Guantanamo being open. So early in the morning, we joined our friends with Witness Against Torture, observing that tragic, outrageous day of 16 years of Guantanamo being open, going into 17 years. And then we made our way to Capitol Hill to Representative Steny Hoyer's office. And we went in, and there were about 12, maybe a little bit more of us, and we asked for a meeting, and we had a petition that has been signed by many people, and we asked to speak to someone in a policy making role, maybe somebody in foreign affairs or military affairs, and we were told there was no one who could see us. And essentially what we did was we stayed in the office from about 2:45 until about 7:30 at night. And at that, within an hour of that, the staffer said he was shutting the office up, and if we didn't leave, he was going to call the Capitol Hill police on us. And basically what we did was we told him he had to do what he had to do, and we had to do what we had to do. And so eventually the U.S. Capitol Police came, and they arrested us.
At any time during the day, did you get any message from Hoyer or any of his foreign policy staff about his views or positions?
Not until the end of the day, when it was coming down to closing of the shop for the representative. Most of the staff had left except for this one staffer who was there, and he said he was shutting the office. It was closed at 5 o'clock, but he continued to remain with us, and we were not going to leave. And but then, of course, I think he knew that we would stay in the office overnight if if we weren't removed. I was thinking about what I was going to order in the cafeteria in the morning, but he decided, and he was getting word from his people above him that we could not stay, that they were going to threaten us with the police. And we did hear that we would get a meeting eventually with the national security staffer, and we were given contact information of who that person was. We were given an email address, but those of us who chose to stay in the office chose to stay because even though we had received an email, we didn't quite get a guarantee of a meeting. We were told that we would, but the problem is between then, January 11th, and whenever that meeting would come about, we knew that people in Yemen were going to be dying and being killed by bombing and injured by the bombing, and people's lives would be ripped apart in the intervening days or weeks whenever this meeting may or may not take place. So out of conscience and solidarity with the Yemeni people, we stayed in the office.
So how many did stay in the end?
7 folks stayed and risked and were subsequently were arrested.
Besides yourself, who were they, or some of the names?
From New York City, we had Alice Sutter. From Wisconsin, we had Joy First and Phil Runkle. From Illinois, from the Chicago area, we had Kathy Kelly. I was there, and let me see, I know I have a list of names here. There was about 7 of us. Phil Oakes from, Richard Oakes from Baltimore was another person arrested, yeah.
So
and Janice Severodzinska, also of Baltimore. So there were 7 of us.
Okay. And did they handcuff you?
Yes.
And where did they take you?
They took us to the U.S. Capitol Police headquarters, which was right there on Capitol Hill.
Mm-hmm. And how long were you in that area?
I think the last one of us, we were released over a period of time. The last one of us was released about 11:45 at night.
And what were you charged with?
We were charged with, let me see, I never pay attention to the charges. I think it was unlawful entry. And we have an arraignment on January 31 in Washington, D.C. Yes. Yeah, unlawful entry is the name of the charge. They didn't write a citation number, but it's unlawful entry.
Have you ever been arrested before?
Yes, many times.
Uh-huh. In these kind of protests?
Yes, all nonviolent civil resistance action.
Going back to when? When was the first one?
My first arrest was on the day of shock and awe in Washington, D.C. in 2003.
Imagine. That awful invasion and everything that's gone with it.
Yeah.
And give you a lot of credit. So, why is Hoyer and those Democrats? Because if there's 50 sponsors, that still means the overwhelming majority of Democrats are not sponsors. Why are they supporting the Saudis in this awful war?
Well, I grew up part of my life in Maryland, and from time to time, Steny Hoyer was my representative. Right now, he's not due to drawing of districts and gerrymandering. But in the 1980s, he would go back and forth as far as supporting the funding of the Contras and voting for foreign and military aid to the various juntas of Central and Latin America. So Steny Hoyer is not a dove. He's a war hawk, and he supports the war machine, and he is a recipient of money from corporations like Lockheed Martin and other war contractors. And so, by extension of that, we have a whole Congress that is funded by the war industry and armaments companies, and the military-industrial complex throughout the United States is in every congressional district. So that's kind of why we are in a perpetual state of war and supporting proxy wars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all over the world. For those who are interested in the national campaign for nonviolent resistance, how would one get in touch to get more information?
Well, we are just regular, everyday folks around the country, and so we don't have a lot of money. We don't have a website even, but we do have a Facebook page, so you could find us at the National Campaign for Nonviolent Resistance, or you could email us at joyfirst5, that's JOYFIRST, the number 5, at gmail.com. Mm-hmm. And what we basically are is a group of people, a network of individuals around the country who are led to risk arrest in nonviolent civil resistance in the spirit of Dr. King, Dorothy Day, Gandhi, the Berrigans, and so many other peacemakers.
Great. Now I wanted to ask you about the other national campaign where you actually earn your living, the National Campaign for a Peace Tax Fund. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So I work for, as you said, the National Campaign for a Peace Tax Fund, and it's peacetaxfund.org. We have a bill in Congress. We're a one-trick pony. It's a bill which would basically expand the concept of conscientious objection to income tax payment. So people who are conscientiously opposed to having their money spent on war and other military endeavors, we would create a fund with this bill. And so the percentage of your money that goes to the Pentagon and military spending of any kind would go into this fund, and it could only be used for non-military purposes. So if the bill becomes a law, someday people who have deeply held beliefs opposed to having their money spent for war and military purposes, their money, that percentage of their income tax would go into this bill or go into this fund. And people would then be able to have a clear conscience knowing that they are not paying for this. And it would free us up to work for peace in other ways.
What percentage of the national expenditures or government expenditures would you say are involved with war?
Well, that is debatable. So I have seen percentages for spending anywhere from 50 to 60%. It's the military spending is not just what the Pentagon spends. We have the Department of Energy that has our nuclear program, which has also to do with nuclear weapons. We have foreign military aid, in which is directed by the State Department. So countries that receive foreign military aid, like Saudi Arabia, like Israel, and like so many other countries, that's military spending too. Then we have other things like the Western Hemispheric Institute for Security, formerly the School of the Americas. That's military spending. And so military spending takes on all kinds of different forms. So it's not just the Pentagon. So that's why the percentage can vary depending on what you're talking about. But the fact is, U.S. Americans, a huge percentage of your income tax money is spent for war and military purposes.
Now, you say it's sponsored, it's actually in Congress. Who sponsored it? Who?
Well, our chief champion and sponsor is Representative John Lewis of Georgia, and he has been our sponsor for many years. Right now, we are seeking more co-sponsors. In the past, we have had many sponsors, but some of them have dropped out, but that doesn't mean we can't get more. On our website, peacetaxfund.org, you can sign a petition which we will forward on to your representative in the House of Representatives in Congress. When we get a good number of signatures from one representative, we will be letting that representative know that you support our bill, and that will help us advocate for the bill in Congress. The bill in Congress is actually H.R. 1947. It's called the Religious Freedom Peace Tax Fund Bill of 2017. Now, in spite of the name, you don't have to be religious in any way. It's just that the people who started this bill many years ago happened to belong to what's known as the historic peace churches. So you had Quakers and Mennonites and Brethren and other people who, since the founding of the American Republic, have been people who are conscientious objectors. But over the decades, people who are not affiliated with any church or religion have been recognized as conscientious objectors.
Wow, very interesting, and good luck with it. Thanks very much for this interview.
Okay, thank you so much.